Good morning. Just talking from the bunker this morning about the what is going to be a very contested topic dealing with birthright, and I just want to explain for those who maybe don't understand what amendment this comes from. Let me just check our sound volumes here, make sure that they're good. They sound good. We're good there. The 14th Amendment is dealing with slavery. It was what it was actually designed for. It came out of the Reconstruction of our country after slavery. And there's a phrase that you're not going to hear the left talk about in this, because they're misquoting the Constitution and misquoting the actual meaning. The 14th Amendment does not just say everyone who's born here. The 14th Amendment grants citizenship to those who are born in America who are under the jurisdiction of America. In other words, they are legally here. They're under the rule of law here. In other words, if you come here illegally, that doesn't work. And if you're on a visa, that doesn't work. And this has been stopped in the UK and Australia. A lot of nations have thrown this out. And by the way, it didn't start here. It didn't start here until the 1960s. We did not hold it that you could just come in and have a baby here and you were a citizen. That actually started in the 1960s, 100 years after the amendment. And why was that? Because it was never intended for us to just have people come here and have a baby. And what started happening was, matter of fact, by the way, Russia and China train people in their country how to come here and have babies and take advantage of our lackadaisical way of actually protecting our Constitution. It was actually designed for slaves. And the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment were designed to reconstruct our nation the way it was intended, the way that a lot of our founding fathers wanted to, but they couldn't get the southern states on board, and we needed them for the revolution. But that's why there was things put in the Constitution that made slavery actually impossible to maintain. But then there was a decision, and it was called the Drew Scott decision. It was by Justice Taney, who was the Chief Justice, who was appointed by Andrew Jackson, and he was a Democrat. And they actually ruled in the Supreme Court in the late 1850s that slavery was legal and that the Constitution permitted it. This drove Lincoln nuts. There was a new party birthed, the Republican Party. The Whig Party, which was the one that was opposite Democrats in the beginning, went away, and the Whig Party went away, and the Republican Party came about. And that Republican Party set out to finally end slavery. And that's why the KKK was formed. People don't know this, but the KKK was formed to take out white Republicans who were looking to free slaves. There's actually, if you go to wallbuilders.com, he's actually got the card from the KKK and a list on it of all the Republican politicians who were for freeing slaves was written on it. And it was handed out to KKK members to target white Republicans. This is something that's not taught. It's not taught because it doesn't fit the narrative. See, we need white privilege. We need every white male. Don Lemon just said the other day with Cuomo on his show that the real terror threat of America is white men. That's the real terror threat in America. And it has been white men on the right who have done everything they can to free up people from the beginning of this nation. And that might sound really odd to people, but it is true. Doesn't mean there have been bad white men, but there's been good black and bad black. It's just stupid to racially class good or evil. And that, by the way, racially classing good and evil by race is racism. Is one of the foundations of racism. All blacks are not human. All white males are evil. That's racism. That is racism in its purest form. It sounds really good, but it's actually, if you believe that way, you're actually falling for a racial spirit. And it's a really, really evil thing. But the 14th Amendment, I'm going to read you a little bit out of the 14th Amendment. I want you to catch the clause because it's really, really important, because without understanding what it actually says, you're going to see them misquoted. Here it is. Here's section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States, this is the line they leave out right here. These 6 words they leave out. And subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges and immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, and property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. That line up there, all persons born, was dealing with slaves. Now, there's a real interesting point in there, because the very founder, one of the co-authors of the amendment, this is why original intent in text is so important. He wrote, this is from, let me get this correct, his name for us here. It would be bad if I got it wrong. Senator Jacob Howard of Michigan wrote this. Speaking of the 14th Amendment, this will not, of course, include persons born in the United States who are foreigners, aliens, who belong to the families of ambassadors or foreign ministers. It was expressly intended. It was written to it. That's why it calls about jurisdiction. That's legal terminology that me and you might not understand, but they understand. And this is why Trump is brilliant. And let me explain to you why Trump has been brilliant on this. By waiting for Kavanaugh to be confirmed, he now has five constitutionally bound original intent justices, I guess is the right word. He's got 5 of them that will interpret the Constitution the way it was written, which is the way you interpret law. In other words, you can't interpret law the way you feel it should be interpreted. When laws are written, they are explicitly written and text is given. And justices look at what was written about that. What were they trying? Because there's legal terms. And they're going to explicitly hold to that if they're proper justices. Now, this is going to be a legal battle for Trump. But he knows it's going to the Supreme Court. This is the problem. He has total right as the president to protect the Constitution. And that's what he's doing. He's not changing law. He's actually enforcing the law. But he couldn't do it with Kennedy. Why? Kennedy sometimes jumped ship. Kennedy, you got to remember, people don't know this. If you're a millennial, you might not know this, but Kennedy was not the first pick of Ronald Reagan to be a justice. If it was Kennedy. Reagan wanted Bork, and he got Bork, and that's where we get the term of getting Bork. And then through that came Justice Kennedy, I think, was in 1988, I think, was Justice Kennedy. Let me just check that, because I do believe that's right. And I think that people don't understand. Yes, he was sworn in February 1988, but it was after Bork got borked. Okay, after Bork got borked, where, by the way, it was Ted Kennedy who got up and said, he's against it. There's a guy, they had literally sent out a guy who murdered a woman. Manslaughter at worst, at best. At best, he was manslaughter. But let her drown, his mistress drown in his car. Okay, didn't call police, got all covered up. Now they're making movies about it because, he's dead. I believe one of the reasons they're making movies about it is the Democratic Party is in its own little coup attempt right now. In other words, the Democratic Party the younger guys are trying to wrestle the party away from the Hillarys, the Obamas, the Warrens. Why? And then why do they want to? Because they want the younger Democratic Party as radical socialists. They want free health care. They want free education. They want free salary. They want all these ideas. Why do you think these young college kids were so into Bernie Sanders? He was promising them about $100 trillion worth of stuff. They were loving that. And they're starting to make movies about the corruption of the Clintons and the Obamas. They'll come out with the Obamas in about another 5 years, but they're going to do that. Why? Because they want to wrestle the party away from those Democrats who know that socialism isn't going to fly at this stage, but they want it so bad. And that's the revolution. This isn't a revolution about women. It's not a revolution about blacks. It's a revolution about socialism. That's what we're in right now. We're in a war about whether our country be socialist or not. Look who's prospering under Donald Trump. More women are employed than ever before. More blacks are employed than ever before. More Hispanics are employed than ever before. All the unemployment numbers for those three demographics are at least at 20-year lows, and some of them are at all-time lows. That's bad. That's bad if you want to get power. That's why they don't talk about it. There's a reason why they're not talking about the economy. Now, Obama has gone out there, and he's trying to take credit for all this, except for the fact that Donald Trump is killing everything that he put in place, and that's what's causing the economy to boom. But Obama took credit for everything. I think he took credit for freeing the slaves. I'm not sure, but I think he took credit. He takes credit for everything, whether it's real or not. Everything that he can lie about that's good, he takes credit for it. He doesn't take any responsibility. And yes, I said it. He lies there. Trump is brilliant here because if he had done this a year ago, number one, Kennedy might not have retired. And he needed 5. You're going to hear this thing. This is a ploy because it's a week before elections. It's not. This was done because he now has the 5 justices at least that he knows are constitutional justices. That's why he's doing it now. Because if he did it a year ago and it made it up to the Supreme Court under Kennedy, you had 4 and 4 and maybe. You don't know where. But we know that he's not asking these justices to break the law. These justices, Roberts, Thomas, let's see if I can remember them all the justices, Kavanaugh, all of them are what we call originalist judges, which the left hates because the left hates the Constitution. And what they want is justices that will rewrite it from the bench. Like why are they so afraid of Roe versus Wade? They're afraid of Roe versus Wade because Roe versus Wade actually has no constitutional standing. There is no clause in the Constitution. It's not written anywhere where you have absolute privacy guaranteed. If you have absolute privacy guaranteed, then you could not have search and seizure of property through a search warrant because that would be a violation of my constitutional right to privacy. And that's what Roe versus Wade was based on, a falsehood. Okay, here's another one for my Christian friends out there. There is nothing in the Constitution that says there's a separation between church and state, and whereas you cannot be a Christian, you cannot pray on school grounds, there is nothing in the Constitution that says that anywhere. That was in a letter that Jefferson wrote to the Baptists in Connecticut, Danbury, Connecticut, telling them that do not worry, there are barriers put in the Constitution that the government is restricted from telling you what religion you can be a part of. But it does not restrict its citizens from practicing their faith everywhere they go. They took a clause, the justices in 1948 took a clause from Jefferson's letter, not from the Constitution, and ruled that there's a separation of church and state. Therefore, the state cannot have anything in it religious. Well, now I want you to think about this. Where original intent comes down. If that was the original intent of our Constitution, then why on all the buildings in Washington, D.C., did our founding fathers put Scripture? Why? Why above the Republican floor in the House? Next time, what was interesting, I want to tell you this little sidebar. What was interesting in Donald Trump's speech this year, in his State of the Union speech, which was his first one he gave, it was the first time in years, that the camera pulled back to show you what was written above Donald Trump, or written on the wall above where he was speaking, and it was "in God." For years, the media zoomed in and didn't cover that. But they panned out this time, and there it was. See, if our original intent of our founding fathers was a separation of church and state, as the left wants us to believe, then there could never be any scripture written on any wall. This is why people are removing monuments of the Ten Commandments. That's not what our Constitution intended. But because radical jurists, what we like to call is the radical jurors that we have put on the court, have decided to, or activist judges is the other term, have decided to create law from the bench, which is also a violation of separation of powers. And here's what our Constitution permitted us to do. When those 9 justices decided that Roe versus Wade was legal, they had the right to sit there and say, no, it's not. And say, you are creating law. And you're not allowed to create law. You can shoot down a law, but you can't make law. And that is actually what our Constitution provided. It did not provide for the Supreme Court to make law. So what's going to have to be written by Trump's executive order is the enforcement of the Constitution. There's no law that says, there is no law that says if you were born here, automatically become a citizen. The Constitution says that everyone who is born within the United States, who is in fact under its jurisdiction, is already a citizen of the United States, is here legally as a citizen. Your child automatically becomes a citizen. And it was designed when they freed the slaves in the Amendment 13 that all the slaves' children would, in fact, become citizens as well. And by the way, it was not passed by, listen, not one Democrat voted for, in the Senate, I think it is, not one Democrat voted for the 14th or the 15th Amendment. Now, some did vote, I think, for it when it was ratified, but not one voted for the actual bill for the 14th to 15th. Now, think about that for a second. They didn't need them, okay? They need them for ratification. They need to pass it. But I want you to think about that for a second. Democratic Party, I'm sorry, not every Democrat's a slave. Or is for slavery, but the Democratic Party has been tied to slavery forever. And I hope this gives you a little more understanding of the 14th Amendment and this birthright thing. There is no such thing as illegal aliens coming into the country, having children, and automatically having citizenship. That is not what the Constitution says at all. And Donald Trump is brilliant with the wisdom of God, that he waited until Kavanaugh. And that's why he waited. He didn't wait because it's an election time. Because, by the way, a lot of people have already voted. So 7 days prior isn't really the best time to do that. He waited for Kavanaugh to get in office and get sworn in. And now he's got the justices that will uphold the law. All he's doing is saying, as president, my job is to defend the Constitution and enforce the laws of the land. And I am doing exactly that I was voted in to do. That is the office of the presidency, is to enforce the laws handed to me. And that's all I'm doing. You don't like it? Ratify the Constitution. But don't ask us just to look the other way anymore on the Constitution, because the Constitution is the glue. It is up next to the gospel. To be honest with you, next to the scriptures. That Constitution is one of the most amazing documents ever written. There's about 4 of them I can name. What is the Magna Charta? That was written in England 150 years before our nation. So, amen. I hope that helps you. Share the video if it does. Give me some comments. I see everyone on here, and thanks for joining us. Boy, a lot of you jumped on. Thank you for that. I hope this helps. I hope this gives you some understanding of the battle of the lies that are going to be told, but you understand the Constitution a little bit better today. God bless you. Have a great day.